Afternoon, everybody. It's not a normal recording time for me right now. It's probably 1:30 in the afternoon here. But I had things going on this morning. I'm working on the trading cards, putting together the bios in the back of the cards. It's a little more work than I thought it was going to be. I'm trying to keep it interesting but insightful and give factual stuff. So I got to kind of fact checks. I want to have a bunch of cards with false information. It's a bit of work, but I think I can knock out about 10, 15 cards a day. If I could find a way to dump half this workload on someone else, I probably would. But again, I kind of want to have oversight of most of it anyway to make sure things are factual. It's a complicated world, a lot of misinformation out there, and you gotta be careful what you share because you never know who is the driving force behind, and money often is the motivation for most things, misinformation or information, and so the truth is a hard thing to decipher sometimes. My friend Ken posted the other day comment on his Facebook page about some of the worst people in jazz, and a lot of controversial stuff got posted, and I'm not going to sit here and debate it, but I do want to stay kind of away from that type of icky insinuation. And Frank Rosalino, he had a horrible ending. He wasn't a horrible person his whole life. From what everyone who knew him said, he was a very joyful, happy, practical joker. People break, and the ending, of course, is as tragic as an ending can be for Frank Rosalino. Anyway, what I'm here to talk about today is this new Jazz Messenger record, and I didn't want to post on it right away. I wanted to give it a few good listens before I had anything to say about it at all. And of course, the packaging is beyond impeccable. It's just really beautifully done. The colors, the texture of the cardboard, the gloss. It's just beautifully presented. It's got these type of sleeves for the vinyl, which people say are better than paper, I think, but I don't really care for them. But that being said, it's a double record set with all the wonder of the Blue Note experience locked into it. We're not gonna sit here and talk pressings. We're not gonna sit here and talk on the weight of the vinyl and all that stuff. But I want to talk to you about some of the surprises on the record. And of course, it's one of the great Messenger lineups that there is, with Lee Morgan, Wayne Shorter, Bobby Timmons, and Jamie Merritt. It's before Fuller joins the cast. And the Lee Morgan, Wayne Shorter, Bobby Timmons writing unit was just incredibly strong. Two of the real strong numbers on here are tracks like Moanin', Bobby Timmons, Dat Dare, Bobby Timmons. Interesting thing about Dat Dare and about Moanin' is the great kind of singer, gospel jazz orator Oscar Brown does vocal versions of both those songs on his first record that are worth checking out. And for me, both those songs have really changed how I feel about them after I've heard those versions by Oscar Brown. He puts lyrics to them, and Dat Dare for me is just fantastic. Number of other people do Dat Dare and do great versions. I think Mel Torme's version I think is fantastic. And Moanin', of course, becomes kind of a standard of the jazz canon. But Timmons was a fantastic composer, a real sense of what Horace Silver brought to it, with pocket and groove and simplicity that allows for you to stretch the fabric and have the freedom to be a great improviser. Complicated arrangement minimizes your ability to improvise. That's one of the things people don't understand about some of this most complex stuff and some of the most deep, free jazz. It really limits your ability to be free. Because there's all these kind of complicated moments. You gotta where are we? I don't know. I better be careful. I better just stay on the road right now because I don't know if I can go over there because I'm not sure where the one is anymore. How's that free? It's so cross reason to me. And you feel it in the static playing of a lot of the soloists on that stuff. Even on Giant Steps, there's times when Tommy Flanagan's like, don't know where I'm at. I have no idea where I'm at. And you could give any of these guys a blues, have no rehearsal time, and there's all kinds of room and space to be free. And Bobby Timmons is kind of that Horace Silver, early Jazz Messenger template of let's make the arrangement, the composition, nothing that's too complex. and leave it with space. And bass is like the orchestrator of that. Basic, simple arrangement allows the soloist the greatest freedoms. And so you really hear these guys stretch out. Shorter's fantastic. But I think the piece on this record I think is most worth talking about. And it jumped out at me on first listen. And on second and third listen, again, it was just a real revelation and just compulsory listening. It is a fantastic version of Monk's piece, Round Midnight. And we've heard many versions of Round Midnight by many different artists on many different instruments. But one of the most common that people come to first, of course, even before Monk, is Miles Davis' version of Round Midnight. And so to hear this great Monk piece being interpreted here by the Jazz Messengers, and now to hear Lee Morgan in that same chair doing his version of what the trumpet does on that piece, hearing Morgan versus Miles, essentially. It's just a revelation how fantastic Lee Morgan is. His depth of soul, his sense of feeling, his sincerity and intensity. And for all the dour sourness and posturing of Miles Davis, the live, viscous, restrained aggression, but creative exploration of Lee Morgan on this number is really fascinating. And it's just really interesting to hear Morgan playing this ballad with all this beauty, all this melody. And he's forsaking a lot of the hard bop and bebop principles of let's avoid melody and just play all kinds of notes. He's playing very much with feeling and centered emotion. And it's the showcase of the record for me is Round Midnight. And to hear Morgan interpreting that song, it's as great a version of the song as I've heard. And I've heard a lot of versions of Round Midnight. It just goes to show you the wonder of a great jazz group that's spent a lot of time together. And it's, again, the packaging is just wonderful here. I'll show you some of the graphic design. I'm not going to be the guy that sits here and talks about all the pressing details and how it sounds versus this pressing versus... It's not what I'm doing. I'm just going to show you some of the beauty of this packaging. I'm going to talk about the beauty of the music. And there certainly is a great degree of... great picture of Bobby Timmons right there. We sure forget about Bobby Timmons a lot. And Timmons' work on Riverside as a solo artist is really, really fantastic stuff. And he redoes a lot of his compositions for the Messengers on his own. And they're all just so interesting to hear. Because oftentimes what happens when he does them on his own, they're a little bit more stripped down, a little bit less intense. That Messenger group is all so dynamic and so full of fire. And so to hear some of that stuff done in a more restrictive, stripped down, bare, but yet still very expressive and emotive sense, Bobby Timmons deserves a lot more credit than he gets. Now's the time. Takes them all aside one. Great energetic stuff with a lot of fire and some great Wayne Shorter moments. And Shorter's this great kind of blend of Coltrane and Rollins and Dexter Gordon with a little bit of out in there at times, a la Coltrane. And obviously Shorter's one of the great composers and tenormen in the history of the music. On side two, you have Moan, and like I said, was great. Blues March is great. The theme, which is that kind of Jazz Messenger theme you'll hear in a lot of their live stuff. That day, around about midnight on side 3. And then side 4 is Now's the Time, which is also really fantastic. A Night in Tunisia, which Blakey loves to do that song. And there's Latin elements to it, Arabian elements to it. It's got some percussion, and it's just a fun thing for him to, I think, exercise and stretch out on. And of course, he does an earlier version of that song on Vic at 57, like I talked about recently. And then he does it again on Blue Note, A Night in Tunisia. 2 records with the same title, 4 years apart, and different lineups and very different versions. But that's one of the wonders of jazz, is how not static it is. It doesn't need to ever be stuck in a mold or stuck in, this is how we do this song. We're going to play this song how we feel today, right now. The immediacy of jazz is just unparalleled. It's the greatest art form that America's ever created, that's for sure. If not one of the greatest art forms that's ever been. My wife gave my hair a nice treatment last night, and it's looking kind of nice, I must say. Happy to report. I'm happy that my hair is kind of coming back out. I used to have my hair down here for years. I used to have dreadlocks down to my waist back in the 2000s. And I spent 20 years probably without hair, very short and clean kept. But since the pandemic started, I haven't trimmed my hair at all. Just letting it go. It's back, baby, as they say. But happy to report I'm feeling pretty much back to normal. Still got a little bit of stuff coming out, but for the most part, I feel pretty darn good. We're blessed, guys, and we can't let the fear-mongering get us too concerned and worked up. Is there concern? Of course. Is there always concerns? Yes. But fear has always been something that the elite have used to control people. And the deeper we get into this pandemic, the more it seems like fear is something that is a motivator. It is something that they're using and capturing. And you always got to wonder motivation behind things. Who's got enough money and power to be driving something? And maybe Big Pharma has more pull and power than we realize. I don't know. But stay safe, everyone. Get the vaccines, and I'll probably get the booster here myself pretty soon. But it still seems like there's a lot of fear-mongering going on versus common sense. And let's see how it plays out. Hopefully there's an end in sight. I'm tired of opening up anything kind of news-related and just seeing such bleak headlines. And jazz is kind of an illumination in all of this. It's this light, a story of overcoming, a story of survival, a story of a people, lost in the wilderness without a voice, having found a coded voice through these instruments that weren't even theirs to start with. Taking your captor's instruments and going, you guys don't even know how to use these. Let me show you. That's what Armstrong does. It's like, that's what you do with this thing? Here, let me show you what you can do with this. And he blew it up. Peeled the horn back. He just took the cap off of it. And all of these jazz cats throughout this era are just doing fantastic, wonderful things. It's such a magical place and time to be allowed to witness it even today. And to have new material like this coming out, even here 50, 60 years later, to hear such new fire. And it's seriously, the Messengers for me are one of the three greatest groups in the history of jazz. And it's a tough, especially from this era. And of course you got to consider the Ellington group and the Basic group, and there's other great groups throughout the history of time. But that Max Roach Clifford Brown group, that First Miles Quintet, and of course the Jazz Messengers, for me, that's go-to listening, Jazz 101. If you're coming to Jazz New and want to know what it's all about, and you're done with just hearing, Miles Davis and hearing the basic stuff, the Jazz Messengers are where you want to turn. Because it'll give you that next tier of players, and that family of musicians that comes to the Jazz Messengers will give you dozens of people to dig and dive into. Blakey was really an incredible university of jazz talent. And unlike Miles, who picked his talent from other established groups and players who had already proven himself, Blakey was often picking people out of high schools and out of really anonymous bands. And Blakey was really one of the great talent scouts. And of course, his sidemen were always bringing other sidemen to the fold. That's one of the great things about this music is, hey, I got a friend who knows a guy over there in Dayton who can play his butt off. When so-and-so said he's leaving, should we give this guy a shot? So the network was really interwoven, especially in the black communities. It's such a small, interwoven fabric the black community is in America. And what happens in any black city rings and reverberates in all the other neighborhoods across black America. And jazz was such an awesome way to put down that history. Just to feel it live off the pages. It's magical. It's a sensation. Of all the records that have come out recently, the Monk stuff, the Coltrane stuff, there's a slew of it. This is by far the most interesting and powerful and important, worthwhile record to have, I think. And that's not including some of that Blue Note Tone Poet reissuing stuff, because that stuff's not like new live recordings no one's ever heard. Most of that Blue Note stuff was stuff that was sat on the shelf or got released in Japan, and Tone Poet's kind of putting it out now. Like the Sonny Clark My Conception. We're not talking that stuff. And that stuff, this is on par with that stuff. But when I'm talking about all those unheard live recordings that are being discovered and released, this is as good as any that I've heard by a group that's as great as any group in any genre of music ever. And I would argue that if you put any band on stage with these guys, you'd shiver in your timbers to try to make as much noise as these cats did. Put Metallica on stage next to the Jazz Messengers and turn down Metallica's amplifiers and give them some acoustic instruments. See what kind of noise you can make, boys. Because Blakey and his men are about to step up. Hope you got your earplugs in. Because the aggression and the intensity and the fire and the sincerity. You know what I mean? No matter how much I love Metallica, and they're a great band. No matter how much you love Creeping Death, there's times where they can only be feeling Creeping Death so much when they're playing it, and they might get into the riff and the feel and the groove, but these guys aren't capturing a set of words every time they play. They're capturing how they feel right now. The song is a vehicle for emotional release, and it's so important to understand that difference. Because it's such a direct interlocutor with how I feel right now that it's always going to come off with such great sincerity if you're listening to the music in the right way. And that's why if you're sitting and listening to your speakers and your wires and cables and your amplifier, you ain't hearing a damn thing. Ain't just pretty notes coming through those speakers, and the speakers ain't telling you the emotional context. You have to feel and listen for that. So you can't do it. You can't listen to speakers and feel what a man's telling you at the same time. It's just such a different experience. And again, the music's the point of this. And so we don't listen to music to hear how our speakers sound. The speakers are to hear how the music sounds. And more power to people who want to live that way. I'm not saying they can't. I'm certainly not condemning them. It's just not how I've ever felt it. Never once has that been my priority. It's just not, I never again, being a musician, I always want to hear what the musicians telling me. I always want to get into their headspace and their emotional context and their experience and try to figure out where they're coming from. I've never ever put a record on and said, okay, this should be a good record to let me know how these cables and speakers sound. It's never been part of my process. Never once has it been something I even thought about. And some of the posts I see, I'm just like, man, it must be weird to listen to music from that perspective. This is a great record to hear how my shit sounds. It's like, and I get that on some level, you know. There's certain tracks I like to play when I got a new sound system in a club and I want to hear what it sounds like. I'm like, oh, let me put that in just to get my level set. But that's more to know how hard the bass is going to hit, how much I got to EQ my bass up or down. I'm just trying to get to my level set to play it. And once it's set, that's kind of the end of that way of thinking. So, anyway, it's all been good. It's all been fun. More power to anybody do what they want to do. Pepper Adams, by the way, listen to this morning. One of the great baritone players. This is on Riverside, number 265, probably 1957, maybe 58. What a great group here, live at the 5 spot. Elvin Jones on the drums. So this is probably before he's with Coltrane. Donald Byrd, this is right about the time he's about to go to Blue Note. He's already probably doing some side work at Blue Note. Dougie Watkins, who of course with Byrd was part of the Messengers for a while, he's on this record and he's about to pass shortly after this. And of course the aforementioned Bobby Timmons. And again, it's just a wonderful live recording. And Pepper Adams is just the go-to baritone guy. You got Jerry Mulligan, you got Cecil Payne, you have a few other great baritone players out there. Leo Parker was fantastic. But for me, Pepper Adams on the baritone. And the baritone deserves its own episode at some point because it's such a cool sounding horn. You sexy motherfucker. That barking, throaty sax on that, that's a baritone. Such a great tonality. And I wish there was more baritone sax in jazz. Speaking of which, Boyd Rayburn, who was a great composer and arranger in the 40s and 50s, had some pretty big band orchestra kind of things, was a arranger producer guy. He actually plays bass saxophone on some of those recordings. And the thing is so big it has to be mounted, and you got to kind of stand up and walk up. You can't walk around with it. It's like sitting there on a mounted stand, and you just got to kind of play into the. It sounds so insane, that real deep foghorn sound. It's wonderful. And I guess there's like a contrabass saxophone, and then even another one. They're such big saxophones at the very low end of the bass saxophone family. And again, those two lowest ones, I don't think they've ever been used in jazz that I know of. Maybe probably some modern compositions have thrown them in there, But the bass saxophone, Boyd Rayburn, interesting stuff for sure. But anyway, we gotta love Pepper Adams. Pepper Adams is a great cat, and he's one of those white cats that was locked in with the brothers. He wasn't the kind of white cat to play with the black guys once in a while. Pepper Adams pretty much just played with the brothers, the Detroit Cats. He was locked in with those cats and those sounds, and he plays a lot with Donald Byrd especially. But I'm gonna leave my episode today at that. So for me, the Blakey record is a high mark record. It's really good stuff. The sound is fantastic. It doesn't sound like some of those live recordings where it was a microphone in someone's shoe, and you're only hearing the drums on the Coltrane record. It's a pretty well-balanced sounded recording. It sounds like it was probably intended to be recorded. And they're in full swing. They do their thing. It's always fun hearing Blakey talk to the crowd as well. It's weird because Blakey's talking to the audience quite a lot. And we're talking about 1960, 61 here. I think it's 60. And this is pre-internet, obviously. And I'm guessing the average Japanese probably didn't speak English at that point. I'm guessing with the internet today, most places, there's going to be some comprehension of English in a large crowd. But I can't imagine that very many people in the audience knew English very well. But he's up there just chatting with them and telling them this and that. And I love Blakey. Blakey's one of the cats I really wish I could have a second to sit down, have a smoke with. You do what you want, Art. Shoot your stuff or have a drink. I'll smoke a joint. We'll sit and talk, chat about the times. Blakey is a cat. He's an interesting fella. One of my favorite stories in the Ken Burns documentary was when Blakey has to chase down one of his drummer's drum sets, one of his friend's sets, because he owed some money to a dealer or something, and the dealer took his drums. And Blakey explains to the guy that he can't make money to pay you back without that drum set. You better give it back to him. I can't remember who was even telling. I think it was Wynton Marsalis telling the story. And I love Wynton. He's a fantastic orator. I couldn't wait to tell him that when I met him one time. Just how fantastic I thought he was at telling a story and really making it come to life. But anyway, it's enough for today. Hope you all be safe. Take care. We'll see you soon. Got lots of great content to come. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. If you want to support the channel on Patreon, please go to the link below and go to my Patreon page and pledge a few dollars a month. It always is appreciated. There's some great stuff in the merchandise store, Jazz Shepherd stuff, and of course we got lots of great stuff coming down the pike. So y'all be safe. Peace.